Good morning. My name is Kathy Kaldenberg, and I'm a retired librarian. I spent 12 years at Sullivan Community School District, where I managed the 3 libraries, and I have always been very interested in technology. One thing I'm going to do right now is turn off that music. I hope it's coming through on the video. Hold on. Okay, but before I turn it off, let me just tell you that this is a podcast. This is a podcast called the Chill Out Lounge, and you can have an hour and 2 minutes of free music right from the podcast. Okay, so today I'm just going to, this is pretty basic. It's for people who are new to podcasts. It's not how to make a podcast, so don't feel like you're going to freak out like, oh, I have to use that technology. No, this is only how to listen to podcasts. Other people have done all the work for you, and all you have to do is listen. And I have been listening to podcasts for ever, basically since I first got my first generation iPod, which was the big chunky one, many years ago. So first of all, what is a podcast? Well, it's just an audio file, okay? The word podcast was first used in 2004 by a tech journalist called Ben Hammersley. It appeared in The Guardian newspaper in England. And what he did, he took the word iPod and put it together with the word broadcast and made podcast. So we are used to listening to mostly broadcast, or us older people, I would say. So radio, okay? So which is terrestrial. It's a limited number of channels. You have your AM, you have your FM, and in those bandwidth, there's only so many channels. And also, it's on a schedule. You turn on your radio, and if it's at 9 o'clock, it's going to be the traffic, or if you're going to, if you turn it on at noon, maybe it's the market report. You know what to expect at a certain time, and you have to listen to what they have scheduled. So you tune in on whatever device you want. So there I'm tuned into 88.3. Does anybody know what that is? KCCK. On the other hand, podcasts are narrowcast. They are as specific as you would want. There's an unlimited, well, not unlimited, but literally thousands and thousands of podcasts out there. It's on demand. You can listen to podcasts whenever you want on whatever device you have that you want to listen to. And you can subscribe to podcasts so you don't miss the episodes that you really enjoy. And so here's just some of the top podcasts right now on iTunes, everything from Beautiful Stories, Dope Queens, Embedded, Stuff You Should Know, This American Life. That's straight from my phone, from the iPod, or from the podcast app. The population for listening to podcasts grew 23%. Just from 2015 and 2016. So it's something that's really getting hot, and especially with the millennials and the younger people. And 64% of people who listen to podcasts listen on either a tablet or a smartphone. Now you can listen on your computer, but yeah, then you kind of have to carry your computer around if you want to be portable with your podcast. Each month, there are 5,000 new podcasts launched. Okay, so it's an exploding category. The 20 categories with the most podcasts are listed here. I had no idea that Christianity would be the top one, but after that's music, comedy, TV. But you can see all of these, there's a wide variety of topics and categories being available, and kind of interesting, podcasting itself has a lot of podcasts. So there's podcasts on how to podcast. That's kind of meta. So how do you listen? Well, you can listen straight from your MacBook. And so when you walked in, I had some music going. That was from iTunes, from their podcast selection. And it was just running in the iTunes application. If you don't have a MacBook, you can have iTunes on your PC or listen to whatever music or audio program you have on your PC. I just say right up front that I'm an Apple person, and so I know a whole lot more about how Apple stuff works than I do the PC side. So this presentation really does focus more on the Mac products. So you can listen on your MacBook, and let me just real quick pull up what that looks like in iTunes. And let's see, so here I was listening to one called the Chill Out Lounge Mix. And let's see, my podcast, I don't subscribe to any right now. I don't use my Mac to manage my podcasts. I use my phone, but you can look at, let's see, let me go back here. Music, movies, podcasts. Okay, I want to get back to where I can find all the podcasts. So right now I need to go back to the iTunes store. Okay, and under, okay, it's not in music. Okay, so this is one reason I hardly ever use iTunes, because I get lost. Let's see. There's podcasts right there. Yeah. Yeah. So this is going to take you to the main podcast page. And this is where you can look around a little bit to see what kind of podcasts are available. And then you can actually listen to them on your computer. And you can manage all of your podcasts from your iTunes account as well. Okay. I, as a user, tend to like to be more mobile, so I use pretty much strictly my iPhone to listen to my podcasts. So this would be my device, but you could also use your iPad if you like to carry that around. And the app that I use is just called Podcasts, and it's the Apple app. There are a lot of other apps. The most highly rated one right now is the one called Overcast. I have not used that, but you can also just go into the iTunes store and go to podcasts, and we'll give you a lot of recommendations for podcast players. The rating for the Apple app for podcasts is about 6 to 7 stars. So it doesn't have the highest rating, but that's the one I'm familiar with, so that's the one that I use. You can also listen directly from the web for lots of podcasts. Most podcasts have an associated web page, okay? So if you are sitting at your desk and you're doing some work and you think, oh, I want to listen to podcasts while I'm doing this, you could go to the web page and bring up that podcast. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called Big Picture Science. It's from the SETI Institute, and they do a lot of things on science, and this was just one of their...
You're super busy, always zipping around, but it won't help to stop the Earth and get off. The whole universe is in motion, down to its last atom. Stick around and find out why you can never be at rest, even sitting still, and what this means for the passage of time and the fate of the cosmos. It's moving right along on Big Picture Science.
Okay. The audio on a web version may not always look like that. It might actually stream right from the web page, but on this one they have a separate app basically that it takes you to when you click on the link. Okay, so how do you find podcasts? Well, you can, like I say, you can go to the iTunes page and you can just look around in there. These are some of the categories: the arts, business, comedy, education, pretty much anything that you can think of, there's going to be a podcast about it. And because it really can be a niche market. If there's somebody who has a microphone and a computer, they can make a podcast. Here are some of the featured collections that you can find if you go to your app and just click on featured. So you can see everything, true crime, one of my favorites, the book lovers category. There's the whole section on how to make a podcast, because lots of people, once they get to listening to podcasts, they think, well, I want to make one. A lot of live music from concerts, stories. So how many of you listen to books on CD when you're traveling? Okay, so maybe you pick those up at the library, maybe you buy them. Well, you can get a ton of that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily an entire audio book, but stories from podcasts. And they're free. You can, if you like to run and you need advice, there's tons of people that want to give you advice. So this is just like the tip of the iceberg, but these are some of the categories you can just explore in. Okay, so you can also, in the podcast app, you can search for something you're interested in. So I just pulled some random things. Game of Thrones. There are a ton of podcasts on Game of Thrones. Do you like to quilt? There's a bunch of people doing podcasts on quilting. Do you like football? As you can imagine, there's tons of podcasts about football. And you can go in and you can look at the episodes and choose certain episodes, or you can subscribe, and then you'll get everything that they put out. Now, one thing I did read when I was doing a little research is that podcasts do sometimes have a short life. Like somebody will get really excited about making podcasts and then they'll just quit. Okay, but then you have the big name ones, like from NPR or like ESPN. Like a lot of the commercial media outlets are now doing associated podcasts for their shows, and those you can pretty much predict that they're going to be there when you look for them. But you can look for any topic. I looked like for Route 66, okay? And there wasn't anybody doing didn't seem to be a just Route 66 podcast for itself, but there are tons of people who had done episodes, like the Kitchen Sisters, who do a lot their podcasts about cooking and finding kitchens around the United States and the world. So if you're a curious person, podcasts are an amazing way to find out about what's going on, and especially if you're things that you're interested in. You can also look for lists that other people have put together. So like Entertainment Weekly, the 15 podcasts you need to hear. Let me just take a look at that real quick. So some of these you may have heard of. For the film buff, you must remember this. I'm pretty sure they're going to have Serial in the list here. For the TV addict, for the gamer, if you like to be scared. Okay, so those are some that Entertainment Weekly recommends. And then there are ones that have received awards. And there's a list. Okay, so let's see. The best produced one last year was Radiolab. So they get awards every year. Anyone ever heard of Radiolab? They've been around a long time. They do a lot of science, and it's just like very in-depth, very well produced. And that's what you'll find with podcasts, is it's a wide range of sophistication in the and how well the production values are. Okay, because for example, podcasting coming out of schools is very big. Have your kids do a little radio show for, your middle school or something. So those are podcasts too, but they may not be as high a quality in the way they're edited and put together as, some that we would find on this list. So these would be more of the ones with high production values. For economics, anyone ever read them, like in the Wall Street Journal? They do a fantastic podcast. Anyone ever watch TED Talks? Okay. You can listen to TED Talks from their podcast. And in addition to that, there's an NPR show called, it's like Inside TED Talks or something like that, where they take a topic and then they interview the people who've done the TED Talks and have little snippets from the TED Talks and put them all together into a podcast. And it's a really, really great podcast. And NPR actually does a lot of excellent podcasts. Okay, so now that you're hooked on and think that maybe you're going to take the plunge and do some of this listening on TED Talks, on podcasts, let me just hook you up to my phone. Probably go back and forth a little bit on this. Okay, so let me look. Okay, so I'm going to just click on one of these, and
this is Point of Inquiry for
Monday. I don't
Monday.
want to listen to it.
April 18.
Stop. Okay. You can get a in-depth, detailed description of what the TED Talks, what the podcast's about. And then if you click down below, see where there's that little runner going across, you click on that, and that will bring up a different screen where you have controls, okay? So you can play.
2016.
You can go forward 15 seconds. You can go backwards. Or you can have it sped up a little bit. Anybody a speed listener? Not me. I like to listen to it at 1, but you can actually slow it down too.
Hello,
Okay.
and welcome to Point of Inquiry.
You can also share. Okay, so depending on what apps you have on your iPhone, you can share it with the message, like you could send it out to your friend. You could put it in an email. You could make a note of it. You could put it on your Pinterest page. You could tweet it out. You could share it on your Facebook. You could Pocket is a reader I have for saving news and that kind of thing. So it kind of depends on what your apps are, but there's lots of different ways you can share. You can even copy the link and then paste it somewhere. And see what else I have. No more. Okay. And let's see what this is. Okay. And here's some other things. You can go to the next podcast. You can add to your list of what's up next. Now you can download. Okay, now this is kind of important. Depending on what kind of plan you have for your data. If you have a data plan where you can walk around with your phone and not be in your wireless and listen to whatever you want, as much as you want, you probably are not going to do a whole bunch of downloading. But if maybe you're in your car and you don't know what the reception is going to be like, if you're going to be able to get a signal, 3G or whatever, or on a plane, yeah. So you could download the episode and then you just delete it off your phone when you're done. You can mark it as played, and that way when you go back to your list, it won't come up. You can save the episode for later. You can view the full description, like we did before. Let's see, let me go back. Or you could share the episode, and that'll bring up those same controls as I showed you before. Okay, so let me go back to, okay, this is an embarrassing part where I show you I have 568 unplayed. Let me go to this first and then go here. Okay, so this is just listing all the ones I have unplayed. So I subscribe, I don't know, maybe 50 different podcasts, and obviously I can't listen to all of them, but I can just scroll through here and say, okay, I definitely want to listen to Planning Outdoor Landscaping, Talk of Iowa. It's all about Iowa plants and when we should go. And actually, if you guys don't listen to the IPR station, the Talk of Iowa has, and if you're interested in Iowa stuff, that is one you should subscribe to. This one's really good, The Ordinary Spaceman. It's about a guy from Iowa who became an astronaut. Maybe you don't even know about that guy, but he wrote a book, and I heard him on the radio or on podcast. It's called the TED Radio Hour. That's the one I was talking about before. So anyway,
Support for TED Radio Hour comes from the Lagunitas Brewing.
So these are the ones that I actually subscribe to. And so when I scroll through there, I can see which ones I haven't played yet. And if you don't listen for a long time, it just stops, and then it'll just say, well, let's see if I pick one that I haven't listened to. See, this podcast has stopped automatically updating because you haven't viewed or played. Okay, I just haven't had enough time. Okay, and then, so anyway, the thing about the podcast is it's completely individualized to you. What I like is not necessarily what you're going to like, but you can make your own list. Here's your featured list. And here's your top charts. So that's going to just tell you what's been downloaded most from iTunes recently. The one that has gotten a lot of people hooked on podcasts is the one called Serial. A lot of people between 20 and 40 have listened to that. The first season was sort of like a true crime thing. Like if you liked Making of a Murderer, is that what was on TV? Or there was a documentary on TV this fall that everybody was talking about. Well, Serial is kind of like that. The second season's about Bo Bergdahl, so that's really interesting too. So these are all one's in the top chart. If you like stories, the Moth podcast is amazing. But if you just want to learn how to manage your money, or there's one for everybody. Okay. So let me connect back up. Oops, that's the wrong thing. Okay, so I've kind of pointed out some of these things already. I forgot to go to settings, but for each podcast that you subscribe to, you can say how you want it to appear. Do you want the newest one at the top, probably? Are you going to be subscribed to it, or are you just going to search for it? Do you want to be notified when something new comes up? How often do you want to have your phone check it? Do you want to limit the number of episodes that are being shown? Okay, and so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how I listen, and just give you some ideas of how, if you're not typically right now somebody who listens in a mobile way, well, here's how you might do it. So I have, of course, the standard issue earphones for the earbuds from Apple. I also have, these are called bed phones. Anybody have any trouble sleeping ever? Okay, so when I was working, lots of times I couldn't sleep. Now I sleep just fine because I'm retired. But if I was just laying in bed and my mind was racing, I would just listen to a podcast. And actually my favorite one was the TED Radio Hour, because the guy has the most wonderful voice. And these are headphones you can wear and you can sleep. You can put your head down. It doesn't poke you. They're called bed phones. I actually wore them out. Got to get a new pair, but I don't really need them anymore. And they come with one of these things to keep you in the dark. And then the picture there is referring to Bluetooth, okay? So a lot of us now have Bluetooth in our cars. So you don't have to physically connect your phone with a cable to your audio input. You can just select Bluetooth, turn your phone on, and then you can hear your podcast right from your car speakers. The other thing is that you can use Bluetooth speakers or headphones as you're doing the laundry or raking up leaves or whatever it is you're walking around doing that normally you would just be having random thoughts, but you could be having information come to you instead. So they actually have a great selection of Bluetooth headphones in the back here in the store. And then I'm sure you've got a jam box or some kind of speakers too that you can buy. So that way you're not tethered to the headphones connected to your phone and the cord keeps getting wrapped up in things. So that's an option. If you're not sure how to use your app, there of course is the support at Apple, and the same for Android as well. Okay. So that's kind of my story about podcasts, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or anybody, yeah.
I was just wondering if there were commercial interruptions in some of these. It usually are in NPR, but
from what I've heard podcasters say about how they make money is that they can't really they haven't figured out yet how to do that. So they do, a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, whether they're NPR or other, they tend to have sponsors, okay? So like the Great Books is a sponsor, Audible.com is a sponsor. There seems to be a bunch of them that sponsor a lot of podcasts. I've heard a lot of the same ones over and over again. I wouldn't call them commercials per se, but there's a lot of sponsors, and usually they'll start the show with that, they'll interrupt the middle of the show, and then they'll finish up with that. Yeah. So the funding process for podcasts, I think, is in flux. They can't really figure out how to make money on it, but yeah.
Are they only audio, or are there also like video?
Yeah, I meant to mention that at the beginning because there are a lot of, they call podcasts, I guess. And just as a user, I'm very focused on the audio, and I'll watch the screen thing is a whole different ball of wax for me. So yeah, a lot of the producers of podcasts may also, in addition, do a vodcast. And that, I suppose, could show up on YouTube, or you could watch it on your phone. Or I don't know if that's such a big thing as it was as at the beginning of podcasting. Do you watch any podcasts?
I asked because I think, like a year or two ago, I maybe caught a Rick Steves episode.
Yeah. Well, when the podcasting first became big and a lot of people were using like GarageBand to make their podcasts, there's a way to put images in to a GarageBand production, and it's basically like little slides, but that really isn't that isn't video. Yeah, I don't know as much about that. I think there are other things that do that better now with YouTube and all that, yeah. Do any of you listen to podcasts right now? Yeah, what are some of your favorites?
Oh, The Moth, I love it.
Oh, yeah. I love The Moth, too. And that's just a great one. You just never know what's going to be on there. Yeah, that's a great storytelling one, The Moth, yeah. Anybody else have any favorites? Okay. So I would just encourage you to give it a try. Doesn't cost anything. If you've got a device already, just download the app, and it might even come native. Does the podcast app come native with the iPhone?
We had an update in it.
Okay. Myself, that app is just fine for me. I used to use Stitcher, and that seemed a lot more commercial to me. There is another app called NPR One. If you really like productions from National Public Radio, That app is a discovery app, so basically it will take the productions from the NPR and try to predict what you will like. And NPR just has a lot of podcasts. I'm just going to do a quick refresh on here. It's a slide I think I'm missing. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, here, that's what I was looking for. NPR One. You can get it for all the different devices. So handpick stories based on what you like. And then the other thing is that this happened yesterday. Google Play came out with their own podcast thing. And it adds podcasts to Google Play Music, so they didn't have that before. So now, if you're like a Google product person, and this would be on the Google Music app, now you can listen to all the popular ones, just like you would with your Apple app. And what they are advertising as a kind of differentiate themselves is saying that it will try to predict what you will like based on other things that you've listened to. Because finding things sometimes is a little frustrating. But basically, what I do is I just listen. Lots of times the podcast will say, and if you like this podcast, you will like this one too. And that's how I ended up with a list of 500 things that in arrears. But okay, any other? Okay, well, thank you.